Four London lads, riding high on 2 hit albums, are somehow flat broke. EMI, their record label, is practically breathing down their necks, demanding a tidy 3-minute radio single. Then, Freddie Mercury, with that inimitable swagger, strolls into the studio. "I've got our next record," he declares, and proceeds to drop a 6-minute, chorusless, operatic maze of a track that the label instantly, and quite emphatically, brands unreleasable. That song, as you probably already know, is Bohemian Rhapsody. But within 6 months, it's going to be #1 for 9 straight weeks, rocket Queen into superstardom, and utterly rewrite the rulebook for what rock radio even thinks is possible. We're peeling back every single layer: the crushing money crisis, the insane 180 vocal overdub gauntlet, the maverick DJ who dared to break the embargo, and the ingenious hidden chord trick that still makes seasoned producers gasp. Queen had just wrapped their 1974 Sheer Heart Attack tour, but instead of celebrating, they were staring down a mountain of debt, over £200,000 thanks to dodgy management deals and a fleet of perpetually busted tour vans. Seriously, talk about a raw deal. EMI was pressing hard, their message crystal clear: deliver a concise single, or you risk losing all marketing support. It was a thinly veiled threat, a do-or-die moment for the band. Freddie, meanwhile, wasn't thinking about concise. He was obsessing over a sprawling, 3-part mini-opus he'd been humming, refining, and sketching out since his college days. A tender ballad, a flamboyant mock opera, and a thunderous hard rock coda. He scribbled the title Bohemian Rhapsody on a battered notepad, utterly convinced that these wildly disparate segments not only belonged together but had to be together. The rest of the band, not exactly sold. Brian May, ever the pragmatist, worried sick that radio stations would never touch a 6-minute track. Roger Taylor, ever the blunt force, famously called it career suicide. But Freddie? He absolutely refused to slice it down. His ultimatum was classic Mercury. Either we release it whole, or we find another band for me to join. Talk about conviction. With those ominous label deadlines looming, they booked studio time at Rockfield Farms in Wales, under strict orders to nail a hit. But instead of a neat radio-ready tune, they started tracking the ballad section, secretly planning to stitch the sprawling opera and rock ending onto it later. A little bit of musical subterfuge, if you will. By the end of week 1, EMI executives paid a visit, expecting naturally a polished radio cut. They left utterly baffled, muttering that the song was too complex, too long, and had no chorus. The band was then politely, but firmly, informed that the label simply wouldn't fund promotion if they insisted on releasing this. Queen now faced a brutal fork in the road. Compromise, split the track, chase radio's approval, or double down, trust their gut, and gamble absolutely everything. Back in London, the band regrouped, relocating to Psalm Studios and enlisting their trusted producer, Roy Thomas Baker. Baker's jaw, by all accounts, nearly hit the floor when Freddie declared he wanted to triple the vocal layers. Freddie laid out the audacious plan. Almost every single singer's note you hear, except the bass line, of course, would be Mercury, May, Taylor, and even bassist John Deacon, stacked again and again, track upon track, until the magnetic tape itself was practically translucent from the sheer number of passes. It was an audio engineer's nightmare, a sonic painter's dream. They locked the studio doors for 3 intense weeks. Baker and engineer Mike Stone, absolute wizards of their craft, essentially invented a technique they called sound on sound. This involved recording on 24-track, mixing that down to stereo, then refeeding that stereo mix back onto fresh tracks, miraculously freeing up space for even more vocals. They repeated this painstaking process again and again, until the operatic section alone contained an astonishing 180 overdubs, an analog layering feat that literally pushed the recording machine's physical width to its absolute limit. Meanwhile, Brian May spent countless nights meticulously crafting that iconic, bell-like guitar solo, recording it through a homemade treble booster he'd famously cobbled together from a tube radio, and, believe it or not, a nail file. Pure genius born of necessity. The solo itself is one continuous, breathtaking take. No punch-ins, no edits. Why? As May later quipped with a wry smile, we ran out of tracks and patience. Freddie, ever the perfectionist, insisted on authentic operatic phrasing for the vocal gymnastics, the dramatic calls of Galileo, the playful Figaro, and that thunderbolt Bismillah chant. The band chanted these lines until their throats were practically raw. Then they'd sip honey tea and chant again. Dedication. Thy name is Queen. When the final master clocked in at a daunting 5 minutes and 55 seconds, the band grinned triumphantly. The label? They groaned audibly. Radio simply will not play a song that long. Cut it or shelve it. No room for negotiation. Queen, of course, refused. Their manager, a man named John Reed, stormed out, warning them they were signing their own death warrant. The stakes couldn't have been higher. With no promotional budget approved, the single was essentially condemned, sitting in the vault, ironically labeled commercial suicide. But then, a glimmer of hope. Enter Kenny Everett, London's most flamboyant, mischievous and utterly beloved radio personality, and, crucially, a good friend of Freddie's. At a chance dinner, Mercury slyly slipped him an acetate copy of the track, whispering conspiratorially, "Do what you want, darling, but maybe don't play it more than once." A wink, a nod, and a legend was born. That very weekend, Everett hosted his Capital radio show. He queued up Bohemian Rhapsody, let out a characteristic laugh, and proceeded to play it a staggering 14 times across 2 days, playfully joking, "Oops, slipped again." The switchboard, predictably, jammed. Listeners were clamoring, demanding to know where they could buy that record. Bootleg cassettes began circulating like wildfire. Pirate stations, always eager for a sensation, picked it up. The buzz was undeniable. Within a single week, EMI's mailroom was overflowing, absolutely buried under a deluge of requests for this supposedly unreleasable track. The executives, eyes wide with disbelief, blinked. They reversed course faster than you can say, Galileo, green-lighting an immediate release. They rushed the single to stores with a plain sleeve. No marketing, no promo budget, just stark white space and the elegant Queen crest. The music, it turned out, was all the marketing it needed. On Halloween 1975, Bohemian Rhapsody officially hit the shelves. The band performed on Top of the Pops, famously miming on a stage, lit rather ominously, like a funeral parlor. It was here that the now iconic four-head diamond shot was invented by the director, a clever workaround because the BBC, in their infinite wisdom, refused to show instruments during the opera section. Classic television censorship, but it gave us an unforgettable visual. Sales exploded. 250,000 copies in just 5 days, 1 million by Christmas. This was no mere hit. It was a phenomenon. It knocked the Bay City Rollers off the top slot and stayed there for 9 consecutive weeks, becoming the UK's coveted Christmas #1. And decades later, it would achieve another incredible feat, the first single ever to top the charts twice with the identical original version. Unprecedented. Critics who had initially branded it pretentious were now falling over themselves, hailing it as the Sgt. Pepper of the 70s. Record labels, suddenly seeing dollar signs, scrambled to scour prog rock acts, practically begging for multi-suite singles. But none, absolutely none, could replicate the formula. Because the formula wasn't just a sound. It was stubborn audacity, wrapped in immaculate harmony, fueled by sheer, unadulterated conviction. But let's zoom in, shall we, and really dig into the music itself. Because beneath all that glorious bombast and theatrical flair lies a meticulously crafted Swiss watch of structural genius. The intro, that haunting 5-part a cappella chorale, isn't just random. Its chords actually spell out B-flat major, then pivot dramatically to E-flat via a deceptive cadence, a musical sleight of hand that, if you're really listening, makes the hair on your neck stand right up. The ballad section, while nominally in 4/4, slides metrically in a way that's pure Freddie. He elongates certain syllables, like the word court, so it lands on the and of 2 rather than the strong downbeat. This creates an almost ethereal, floating sensation that perfectly mirrors the lyric about reality slipping away. It's subtle but brilliant. Then, the opera block. It modulates upward every 16 bars, a classic trick lifted straight from Rossini overtures. Each new key isn't just a change, it's a deliberate nudge to the listener's heart rate. Musicologists, in fact, have a wonderfully dramatic name for this: the circle of fear. And then, the hard rock finale. It drops to A major, a whole step below the opera's screaming climax, expertly exploiting a psychoacoustic principle. A sudden drop in pitch, followed by a thunderous riff, feels like an absolute adrenaline shot straight to your soul. And here's a beautiful, almost poetic detail. The lyric, "Any way the wind blows," recurs at both the very start and the very finish of the song, forming a perfect, closed loop. The story, in essence, ends exactly where it began, a musical Mobius strip that subtly hints the nightmare, or perhaps the confession, restarts the moment the needle lifts from the groove. These aren't accidental flourishes. They're the architectural blueprint, the meticulous design that makes 6 minutes feel like 2, the secret sauce that radio programmers couldn't decode, but that listeners, instinctively, felt deep in their bones.